Hi everyone, I'm Benjamin. Welcome to my book club. Today we're talking about book 3 of my fantasy reading challenge, where I'm challenging myself to read 10 fantasy books and review all of them this year. Book 3 of the challenge is The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, the first book in the first Mistborn trilogy, and the first of my fantasy reads that is quite a chonker. I'm just going to say right off the bat that I adored this book. I liked this book more than I thought I would. This book has sparked a desire to read more fantasy inside me that the previous 2 books in the series haven't yet. While I loved Between Two Fires, I felt more like I just wanted to read more Christopher Bullman following that one, whereas following Mistborn, I want to read more fantasy. I loved this book. I'm going to jump right in talking about the things I liked about this book. And first off, the plot and the structure of the plot of this book is so good. It's structured as a heist story, like Ocean's 11 or some of the other really good heist movies. It follows that same structure of gathering the team and the specialists and putting together the plot and seeing the planning and then executing sections of the plot, and then some of them being foiled and there being setbacks, and then the eventual execution of the final heist. And seeing that in a fantasy world was so enjoyable. I loved every second of that structure. It really gripped me and drew me through the whole book. The book is 800-900 pages long, and it didn't feel like it to me. I read it in the same speed that I read a book half its size. I was up late every night reading it because I just couldn't put it down. This heist is set in this world that is so richly developed and so beautifully described. We have this slave race of people known as the Scar who serve under the nobility, and they're treated terribly. They're worked hard in the farms. They're worked hard in the cities. They don't have money of their own. They're not paid. They're fed at soup kitchens, or they're fed barely out in the plantations. Scar are beaten and killed by the nobility with zero repercussions from any leading or ruling class. Scar women are sexually assaulted and worse by the nobility, and then are by law killed, so that there are no nobility Scar interbreeding. That is, it is codified in the rules of the society that when someone from nobility sleeps with someone of the Scar background, that the Scar must be killed. And that is dreadful. It paints such an awful picture of these people, and it's been going on for 1,000 years. In other books, you would perhaps see this subservient race as like a simmering cauldron of rebellion, of just waiting for the tipping point. But in Mistborn, the Scar are beaten down and have been in this for so long, they don't even think about things like rebellion. They're all slouched over. They don't stand up fully. There's a beaten race of people who, even given the tools and weapons of revolution, wouldn't be able to do it. There's no spark or hope or fire left in them. And you've got the Lord Ruler above all of this almost omnipotent, all-powerful God Emperor of the land. He's ruled for 1,000 years. He's given the nobility the powers that they have because many generations ago, they were his allies who helped him rise to power. And the Scar have been reduced to this subservient race because they weren't there supporting him when he was rising to power. And he's seen very rarely in the book, but is characterized very well in the dread that people talk about him with. People use his name in the same way that we use the word God. Instead of saying, "Oh God," they say, "Oh Lord Ruler." He is seen as a godlike figure that is unstoppable and all-powerful. And in this world, we get our main cast of characters who are all amazing. And they start to work on a heist. But instead of stealing a particular object, the aim is to steal the treasury of the Empire, and in doing so, topple the Empire itself. And it's a task of such huge proportions that it wouldn't even be thinkable were it not for our main character in this book. Our main character in this book, is Kelsier. He is charismatic, always smiling, but he has this background of sadness as well, which comes through really well. But he is the sort of person that other people want to be able to believe in. He makes other people believe in themselves, and he makes other people believe that the impossible is possible. And it's through that this whole heist is even thought about as something that might be able to happen. The other characters are just as good. They're all so well fleshed out. We've got Vin, the young street urchin who's grown up with an abusive brother and grown up in thieving groups and on the streets of cities. And she has just awoken to some power within herself that she shares with Kelsier, and he takes her under his wing as an apprentice, which might be a story that's been done before a lot in fantasy, but for me, I'm a new fantasy reader. I haven't read a lot of, apprentice-master relationship stuff, and this one I think is done really well. And we have the other members of the crew. We've got the muscle in Hammond, who is, he philosophizes, but he's also a brute soldier. We've got Doxson. He's not in any way special. He doesn't have the powers that the rest of the group has, but he's better than anyone else at the numbers and the logistics and getting people and objects where they need to be when they need to be there. He's your, in a modern thing, he'd be your guy on the computer that's running everything. You've got Clubs, whose ability is to hide the group from the Lord Ruler, and he is grumpy, and I don't want to say too much more because I don't want to spoil anything from the book, but he's one of my favourite characters. I really like Clubs. You've got Breeze, who can affect other people's emotions, and the way he does that and the way he uses it is masterful, and when we see from his viewpoints, we see the character he really is. Another thing I loved was the magic system in this. Allomancy is really well written. I've read some critiques that people say that Brandon Sanderson's magic system doesn't have like a soul to it because it doesn't have like a mystery magical element to it. Like maybe it's too over-explained, but I don't have that problem at all. I think I would find that slightly annoying. This works so well for me. The general principle is that people can drink and ingest and eat metals into their body, and then they can burn those metals inside their stomach through magical powers to grant them different abilities, be it super strength or super senses, or being able to affect the emotions of other people, or the most flashy one is to be able to push or pull metals towards or away from yourself, including if you push a metal that's heavier than you, you will be pushed back. And the uses of this are so interesting. Most people that gain these powers, and these powers are exceptionally rare in this world, have one of them. They might be able to do one of these things. They might be able to push metal. They might be able to soothe people's emotions, or they might be able to see and hear really well. But very rarely does someone come up that can use all of these abilities, and they're known as Mistborn. And Kelsier is one of these Mistborn, and we see him using his powers and teaching these powers to people. I love how well explained the powers are. I love the idea that you can see that they're running out of a certain metal, so they have to use a different metal. And the length that Sanderson went to explain it meant that all of the scenes involving these powers I didn't find confusing in any way, and I just found exciting. Another thing I loved was the action scenes. At no point was I left confused about what was going on in a fight or where people were. Sanderson wrote the action and fight scenes in a way that I followed them really easily, and they were really exciting, and it was like a blockbuster movie going off in my head. As far as criticisms, I have very few for this book. The only real one that comes to mind is, like with a lot of books that are plots within plots and heist stories and whatnot, it does at times come off a little bit too convenient that things went that way. In that, like this plot relied on, my enemy doing this, and then of course they do that, but I think showing these characters that haven't been previously shown to be like omnipotent, all-powerful, as being able to put themselves in these positions is a little bit unbelievable. But it's not too bad. And along the same sort of lines there is a little bit of, I know that you know that I know that you know that I know that you know, so I'm going to do this. Which is fine, but is a little bit, I guess, a little bit cliche and a little bit overdone. Look, there's been a bit of a rambling review, but it's just because I'm excited to talk about this book and this series, and I'm excited to read more of it. And I haven't felt this excited about a book in quite a while. I haven't felt this excited about a book since Dune, and before then it was even longer. But this book got me in its clutches right away. Almost right from the start, I was intrigued and involved. And I think it owes a lot of that to the heist structure, which I thought was really refreshing and lovely. And it meant that as a reader, I kind of knew the plot points we were going to hit before we got to them, but I didn't know how they were going to play out, which meant that I knew what was coming up. So I was excited to get to that point. I was excited to get to the bit of the plot where something goes wrong. I was excited to get to the bit of the plot where we find out that one of our members of the heist that we've gotten in had a secret task all along, that sort of stuff. You know, the things you see in all these heist movies. It made me keep turning pages. It made me stay up till 2 a.m. reading the book every night. And it made me finish the book in 2 or 3, maybe 4 days. And I loved it. As for a rating, I'm going to give this book a 9 out of 10. I loved this book. The ending is not my favorite ending in the world, but it's still good enough that I really enjoyed it. I really recommend this book to anyone that hasn't read it. If you're looking to get into fantasy like I am, I think this is a fantastic starting point. Nothing else I've read so far has made me as excited for fantasy as this one. For the next book, when I envisioned this challenge, I almost put in a rule that I wouldn't repeat an author in my 10 books because I wanted to get a wide berth of fantasy stories. And I'm going to try and stick to not repeating an author after this author, because my next book is The Well of Ascension, Mistborn Book 2. I can't not pick this one up. I spent maybe an hour staring at my bookshelf trying to figure out what to read after I finished Mistborn. I picked up half a dozen books, I took them into the bedroom, and I brought them back in here. And it wasn't until I just admitted that I just desperately wanted to read more of these characters, see where this went, see the conclusions of the story, see the ramifications of the events at the ending of this book, that I just accepted that I needed to read Well of Ascension, and I needed to read it right away. And that's what I'm going to do. So book 4 of my challenge is going to be Well of Ascension, and there'll be a video of that coming up in the coming weeks. Let me know in the comments if you've read this book, what you think of it. Let me know if there's any other books that are like this one that I should add to my reading challenge. Again, the current fantasy books that I own are in a shot here. Let me know if there's anything here that might feel similar to Mistborn. And if you want to support the channel, then leaving a subscribe and a like is the best thing you can do. If you want to check out the rest of my fantasy books that I've reviewed so far, the playlist is up here. If you like this sort of content and these reviews, then I'd love if you could leave me a subscribe so you're notified when these videos come out. And most of all, just remember to keep reading.